Hello, everybody, and welcome to this episode of CFO 4.0. Now, if you don't recognize the next voice that's about to come on, then I'll be very, very surprised. So we are in a recap mode today. So for those of you that didn't catch the recent episode with Andi Lonnen about the Finance Business Partner Academy Bootcamp that was going on, we are here to explore the topics that came up. So I know some of our listeners were attending because it actually came up in conversation, which was fabulous. But Andi, welcome back on the show and tell us all about Bootcamp. How did it go?
Thank you for inviting me back, Hannah. I'm so excited to be here again, and especially sharing the fantastic day that was FBP Bootcamp. And before we get cracking, I just have to say that it was wonderful to hear Jordan from Michael Page Recruitment. He promoted the CFO 4.0 podcast. He recommended it as one of the things to stay up to date with. So I think I just had to say that.
Well, there you go, listeners. So you are already on track and doing your learning as per the recommendations from Bootcamp if you're listening to this podcast. So, but yeah, and a massive thank you to for Jordan to mentioning it. It's the best way to find listeners and to reach more people is word of mouth. So what else came up? What are the key themes that came out of the Bootcamp?
Oh gosh, there were so many things. I think one thing I'm always so impressed with is the delegates that turn up. They are so dedicated and committed to the day and to their development and to making the most of every opportunity that's presented to them. So they get stuck in, they ask really good questions and get involved in the breakout groups. And that was a lot of the feedback that we got from the delegates, was how much they enjoyed getting together in smaller breakout groups and meeting different people throughout the day, mixing up the breakout groups, and just how much they benefited from the peer learning and the peer networking. And they said, if anything, that's what they want more of, more breakouts, longer breakouts, more networking opportunities, which is so fantastic to hear because, you know, I'm generalizing, but accountants a little bit more on the introverted side. We always kept the breakouts quite short previously because people, you know, some feedback was they didn't like going into the breakouts, but now it seems to be a lot more universal that people love to connect with other people and hear all their different experiences and best practice and different approaches and different ways of thinking. And I'm sure I said this on the previous podcast, actually, that it's certainly one of the key ways that I really learned was by speaking to other people. I've got my company culture, but when you speak to other people from different organizations, different industries, different sectors, different countries, the perspectives are so different and so enriching, and you can really take that back to the workplace. So that was wonderful to hear how much people loved that. There were so many topics throughout the day. Someone asked me, what's the theme of the day? It's like, business partnering, I guess. It's such a wide topic. We talked about Power Query, so using automation on Excel. That seemed very popular session, and people agreed with me that they were really grateful that was first thing in the morning, because we'd have had that later, it would have really blown our minds, I think. We had some fantastic showcases where people were sharing their finance business partner transformation journeys as well, which is so interesting to hear all the hiccups along the way, how people got started, what went well, who left the organizations as a result, you know, just the absolute honesty, and that it's not an overnight success thing and it's a continual journey. So it really is wonderful hearing from people who are really well on in that space of the finance business partner transformation. And I think we were playing bootcamp bingo. So we have what's called our finance business partner formula, which is the 9 C's model. And the C that came up the most, in my view, was curiosity. So a lot of the speakers mentioned curiosity or being curious. as a really key way that they've developed, or a key finance business partner skill, including from the recruitment perspective, from the Michael Page perspective as well. So it was wonderful to hear that as well. So a lot there. There's loads more, but I'm trying to be succinct.
It sounds like there was a huge amount of learning. So tell us a little bit about some of those transformation journeys, because that's interesting. What were some of the learnings? What did people say was key to their success, as it were, as they went through their finance business partnering journeys?
I think it was probably different for both. So we heard from two different organisations on that. But I think a lot of it was bringing the people along with them. That seemed to be absolutely key. So both in different ways discussed people having different fears of change, of making changes, of doing something differently. There's obvious fears with digital. Will it take over my job? Being a classic fear, of course. I'll never understand it. How can I learn something new? I don't want to learn something new, but it seems to be the only way forward. Lots and lots of identifying what fears were. And I think overcoming that, so people trying lots of different things. I know Keely, for example, at Soccer Tech was talking about playing chess together, making smoothies together, and turning that into business learning, which was absolutely amazing. Ingredients of the smoothies with different parts of the business, and putting it into the mix and the recipe, and what do you get at the end of it, and that sort of thing. So really helping people have fun and be creative. Keely talked about, I remember Keely's because she did this very courageous and creative presentation. She had a go at doing something different, where she produced slides that were all these moving slides, and each image told a story. So she was going through the slides. There was a lot of slides, but they only lasted a few seconds for each one. So I do remember her saying about there was a mountain to climb, people getting off the bus because not everybody loved it. It was a roller coaster, and there was a wonderful image of a couple of people at the front of a roller coaster, one loving it, one hating it. And that's what it's like, isn't it? That's what it's like with transformation. So it was being honest about that. So she had fun putting the PowerPoint slides together and was creative in that. And she really brings that into her workplace as well, in terms of helping other people have fun with it as well. So I think from both transformations, it was about the people. It was identifying, we need to get the process right, we need to do this, we need to do this. But actually, unless you get that buy-in from the people, it just isn't going to work. And it's identifying what the fears are and how to work with them as best possible. And I think both of them said it's a continual journey. It's not an overnight success thing.
And you mentioned, obviously, one of the things I loved about when we talked about the presentations is that they were very open and honest about things that perhaps hadn't gone as planned. So what were some of because I think we learn more from mistakes than we do from success in some ways. So were there any interesting mistakes that came up, as challenges?
Again, it was the people side. It was so much about the fact that you are possibly going to lose some people, and just being okay with that. And but trying not to lose good people. It is trying to take people on the journey. Most people, once they understand it's not going to take their job, or that they will be given support and training, will be okay with it. And some won't. So I think in terms of challenges, people again have been the biggest challenge in the transformation journey. I think that was really the main thing that was mentioned. I don't remember any glaring glitches with technology or anything like that, but I think a willingness to be curious as well, and to experiment, try different things, that was coming out as well. So very interesting stories.
And curiosity is something that you talk about quite a bit, isn't it? And I think we've enjoyed a few conversations. And I think curiosity is a key skill for consultants as well as for finance business partners. So tell us a little. I think it's an interesting topic to explore. So why do you think it's important for that curiosity to be embedded into finance?
Oh, so important, and particularly for the finance business partner role. I think people need to get curious about the business. In fact, Mohammed El Ruby from the United Arab Emirates, he spoke about that. Absolutely fantastic guy. How can you do anything? How can you do finance reports? How can you design KPIs? How can you sit at the decision-making table? How can you gain credibility if you don't know and can't speak about the business and how the numbers link to the business? So his way of getting curious, very similar to mine actually, is to get out into the business, to talk to people, to find out what their business challenges are, to sit with them, to listen to calls, to walk the shop floor, as it were, and find out more about those challenges, and then how can you help support them with their challenges so that you can ultimately achieve those priorities, those business priorities, whatever they are, because it might not be all financial. It might be, net zero goals, or it might be best customer care goals. It can be all sorts of different commercial and strategic priorities. So getting curious about the business, getting curious about what the business needs from you, getting curious about the industry, getting curious about the external environment, what is happening, what is the art of the possible coming up. I just find it fascinating on LinkedIn at the moment, just hearing and reading so much more about digital and AI. It's always in the news at the moment, and there's some that are absolutely going for it, and there's hesitation. And I think I was reading today that it's not been adopted as widely as people would have hoped by now, and so on. So again, that curiosity as to what is out there and who is doing what, and what does it mean for you? What can you engage in? What can you find that will help you do your job better as a finance business partner? And getting curious about people themselves, your stakeholders. Not just what their challenges are, but who they are, what makes them nervous, what keeps them awake at night, and how, again, might you be able to help them with that? It's curiosity for the sake of finding out how you can support more. Cecile from Vital Energy Group, she was saying, we're here to serve the business. If there's no business, then there's no finance function. We are only here to serve the business. And I thought that was a very good point. And you can only serve the business if you are curious about what the business needs from you in the first place, and then how you can support that in a way that others can understand as well, because we do speak our own language in finance.
We do. A lot of acronyms. I remember having a conversation with somebody outside of finance, and they were like, it's a whole different language. And I was like, yeah, but it's just common sense once you understand it. We just have lots of fancy terminology for common sense. So
it's true.
It is true. So I guess, curiosity is, we talk about it almost like as a skill. But is it something that you are born with? Is it something that can be learned, do you think? Or what's your perspective on that?
I think some people are naturally more curious than others and are more able to follow up on that curiosity. I think some people, probably a bit more like myself, are a bit more reserved, a bit more reserved about asking questions, or being a bit nosy, because that's what it is, but it's nosy for a greater good. So it was a skill I learned over time, because in order to do my job well, that's what I had to be, and still have to be now to serve the people I serve, using that terminology. So I think some people it's more innate that they have that ability to ask the questions, to perhaps challenge the status quo, to gate crash team meetings, for want of a better word, and to just keep asking, keep finding out. I remember reading James Cairn's book. He used to be a dragon on Dragon's Den for UK podcasters here, listeners here. And he said, everything I need to know is inside somebody else's head. And he attributes his phenomenal success to his ability to ask good questions. And he learned that skill as well. He wasn't born with it. Maybe we're all born with it to a certain degree, but he learned that when he started off in recruitment, before he started his own recruitment business. So that kind of helps people like me, who it's like, oh, it is okay to ask questions. And I found the more senior I became in finance, the more I was surrounded by people who didn't stop asking questions until they learned what they needed to know. I remember a boss of mine saying, I don't care if I sound stupid. I need to understand exactly what you're telling me, because otherwise I can't make a decision. And I thought, she's absolutely right. I'd have given up ages ago at that stage in my career, because I'd just felt so embarrassed. But actually, it is the only way to keep going and to build and to serve and to deliver more value, is to keep asking those questions. And find the right questions to ask of the right people as well. So yeah, I think it's a combination of both, to answer your question.
And you said obviously it's a skill that you've developed. What were some of the challenges that you had? What helped you tip the balance in terms of learning that skill?
I think it was simply being surrounded by people who were asking questions. So I was surrounded a lot more by the director team as I became more senior. And so you just become like the people around you. You just become part of the environment. I know there's a saying, is it something like, we're the equivalent, or with the average of the 5 people we spend the most time with. And actually, looking back, I think that's true. Because I was spending more time with these senior level people at this stage in my career that I'm thinking, where I did transition to asking a lot more questions and being okay with it. I just became like the people in my environment. So that helped me a lot. James Caan's quote helped me a lot. It's like, gosh, if someone of that caliber, of that ilk, and of that success is being honest about, that's how he learned as well. He learned because those were the people that surrounded him in that recruitment agency that he first worked in. He learned to ask good questions. He learned to be more curious. He learned to be okay with it. He admits he's more of an introvert himself. I'm not saying it's an introvert extrovert thing, but it might be a bit harder for people who are a bit more introverted, because it can feel quite pushy. And I think maybe our culture, our British culture, is a little bit, we don't like to come across as pushy as well. Whereas I spent some time in America, and they're just so open and so curious and ask so many questions. And again, that helps you be that person as well. So that's what helps me personally. So if you want to get good at it, find other people who are good at it, and spend more time with them.
I also think that's a really good piece about choosing the workplace that you're within, is that it's not just about obviously the career prospects, but it's also about the skills that you can gain from that team. And if you're in a team that is successful and surrounded by people of that level, that's an amazing opportunity, even though it may not be the career sort of ladder that you want to go up. It's an interesting piece, isn't it, about finding the right people to surround yourself with. And I love that stat as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's when you actually look back, if you look back on your career, if you look back on, it actually does really seem to ring true. If you're in, I don't know what the official term is. My coach used to call it a mood hoover department, where they just hoover, suck the mood and the air and the living daylights out of the room. And if you're in that environment, you really don't want to become like that. And I know it can be difficult to choose your environment sometimes, but I would say if that's your environment, Monday to Friday, 9 to 5, at lunchtimes, go and find a different environment to be in. Choose to, see if you can get further out into the business, to be in different environments. Go to networking events, you go to conferences, whatever it takes to be in different environments that uplift you and raise your game and raise your standards. Again, going back to the breakout groups that we were talking about and the enriching and the learning, that's certainly, again, just being surrounded by people who were buzzing, who were really raising their game all the time was exciting. It excited me. So I wanted to be that person as well. So there are things you can do, even if you're in a mood hoover department at work.
Yeah, we like to think that we're not, but yeah, it's a really good understanding your current environment and making sure you're exposed to the right kind of people is a definite must. And I guess a lot of people listening here perhaps go, oh God, I wonder whether I'm in a mood hoover environment, or I'm leading a mood hoover environment. What can we do as finance leaders to actually create an environment that encourages curiosity, that helps it grow and helps it develop?
Oh, I think that is such a good question. In fact, I've just done a masterclass on professional curiosity because someone asked me that fairly recently. And I think, firstly, as the leader, is leading the way in asking questions, and finding the right questions to ask. We don't want to be, I mean, the why question can feel like an attack to people. So it's finding a softer way of saying why. I think it's getting really good at questioning skills. It's getting really good at listening to the responses as well. We don't want to, feel like people are being interviewed or anything like that when we're going da 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 with lots of questions. It's a two-way conversation, and it's actually it's an excellent coaching skill as well, asking questions, being curious, and helping people explore their own thoughts as well. So a leader can ask lots of questions of their own finance team. They can take their finance team almost on field trips, if you like, going to other parts of the business. One of the things I did was invite a manager of each department through to our finance team meeting each month, so that they could tell us what they were doing, and the finance team were then able to learn a bit more about the business and ask their own questions. And it's always interesting what questions people have. I always encourage this when at management team meetings, when people, or board meetings, when people are asking questions on the finance report, that gives you such intelligence in terms of what do people need to know. You might not think it's important, but if it's important to them, then bring that into your communication, bring that into your writing, bring that into your verbal communication. It's so much intelligence gathering. It's absolutely brilliant. So I really am a big fan of learning to ask good questions. I remember a boss of mine, she'd soften questions by saying things like, in what way is that an issue, or in what way something, or talk me through, tell me about, which isn't a direct question as such, but it's that openness to explore what people are thinking, what people are doing, giving them a safe space. The why question can feel like such an attack to people. So I think there's a real skill in asking questions as well. I think you can work with your finance team and do some training on this, and ask them, why do you think, and why what do you think some of the reasons being curious will be a good thing? How can we be more curious? Who can we be more curious about and with? Which departments do we need to be curious about? How can we be curious about the industry in which we work? So you can gather lots of information from your own team by simply, working as a group to figure it out and decide. They will tell you what's more comfortable for them than you telling them, right, let's go and be curious. Let's go to this department and ask them loads of questions. That might be a bit intimidating if this is the first time that you've actually got out of finance and gone into the business, for example. So I think leading by example, but really get the buy-in of the finance team as well. To encourage them to ask good questions, and where they can find more information on asking good questions as well. So yeah, that would be my starting point anyway.
And you mentioned that the why question can be quite challenging. I find that quite funny, because that's kind of how I see my role as a consultant, is to ask the why. So, for all of us out there, whether we're consultants, whether we're finance people, how do we ask the why question in a way that doesn't scare the person we're asking it off?
I think that's a really good thing to say, because we're encouraged to go through the 5 whys or the 7 whys or the 9 whys or however many whys it is now, to keep digging deep and dig. Yeah. I love the talk me through what you're doing here, rather than why are you doing that. Talk me through the reasoning behind this. It just softens it, and I feel it softens it. And I think it just opens the door to people to explore. I don't know why we do it this way, or we do it this way because of blah, 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 and compliance or whatever. It just facilitates an open response, and allowing people time to think about their responses as well. And it's more an exploration rather than, I just think the why, maybe it's, if we grow up with it with children, don't we? So it's the why, and maybe that sticks in our minds. So that softening of the why question, or some other ways of asking it, what are some of the reasons? Because that's not asking for everything of why you're doing something a certain way. What are some of the reasons that it's now being, this process is done this way? It's trying to keep the person out of a situation, I think, because that's where people can feel a bit more under threat, and you're just not going to get the most from them in their response. They might feel they're doing something wrong. And of course, their sensitivity around, they might have been shown what was the thing to do when they first joined the company, and we all want to do a good job, so we do what we're shown, even if we don't necessarily agree with it, and we think we'll sort it out at another time, and then we get on the hamster wheel and another time doesn't come, so we carry on doing what's always been done. So it's I think a way of softening that, so that we make it about the process or the system rather than the person who designed it, quite legitimately 5 years, 10 years ago. In fact, one of the delegates mentioned that when we were doing a humanness breakout, and was talking about the sensitivities of someone once designed a spreadsheet, and it's recognizing that they might feel sensitive if the spreadsheet is no longer to be used or is to be developed or updated. Because what was great 5 years ago is probably not so great now. Things have moved on, but we have to manage those emotional sensitivities because everything's people.
Yeah, that's it. And it's always interesting. Weirdly enough, I think I do actually use some of those techniques. Tell me, or can you explain why things, ways I always use? So yeah, my poor clients don't even know it, but I'm using the Andi Lonnen C's already in my consulting work. But I know what you're saying. And I think with change, it's about, I really like that concept of sensitivity, because I see that a lot, is that people are protective of things that they've built because they did it for a reason at the time. But the technology or the process or something has moved on, and they're not quite ready to let go. They're mourning the loss of that spreadsheet that they've built and the effort they put into it.
Yeah.
And that's a difficult challenge.
And hands up, I've been one of those people. Sensitive about my own spreadsheets, and exactly the work that's gone into it. And it's almost like a bereavement, as you said. It's just letting go. It is letting go, and it's not just identifying. We can see it easier in other people than we can see it in ourselves. And I loved it when that delegate was talking about that, because it's like, hands up, that was me. This is the way that we do it around here. It's like, I'm one of those people. And we probably all are, to a greater or lesser extent. So it's observing what you're doing as well.
I think that's a really great observation, Andi. And I think as leaders in any school of thought or any area, we need to be very aware of how we react. I think self-awareness for me is key when you're taking people on this transformation journey. Is like, when you get challenged on something, how do you react? When somebody tries to give you a new way of working. And I wonder how many finance leaders listening to this podcast recognize some of those signs in themselves, that, we're going to try that new process, but still we need to fill out that old spreadsheet that I've always asked you to do. Just so we can run it in parallel, and 6 months later, you're still running in parallel.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I guess for me, that comes back to maybe one of the other C's, which is courage, if I remember rightly, is actually having that, taking that leap and making that jump. So for me, curiosity is obviously a key part, but courage to actually make the changes that we've talked about and to drive things forwards. How else do you see courage in finance business partnering?
Oh, a lot. Courage is one of our bonus C's. Do you know what? I think it takes courage to be curious for a lot of people. It's not a natural thing for a lot of people, like it wasn't for me initially. I think it takes courage for a lot of people who've become finance business partners to actually get out from behind the desks and spreadsheets, the safety zone, the comfort zone. To get out into the business, to speak to other people. I think it can take courage to do an awful lot in business partnering. Of course, it can take courage to facilitate change, to make change. I mean, a lot of people are super excited about this sort of thing. But again, I think a lot of accountants that I know are naturally more risk averse. And I think that's an important trait in lots of accountants. And we have to recognize, and we have to explore what's the worst that could happen. We do not want to take a company down. But the other question I love, I think I recently did a blog post on this, is what is the best that could happen, which can really help you think differently about something that you're taking the courage to do. And courage can be in really small things and it can be in really big things. I think courage, the little bits of courage, and if we do lots of little things that take courage, can really help us do a bigger thing, because we realize the world didn't end, it will be okay. I mean, hopefully people have a safe space in which to work, or can create a safe space in which to work. I was hearing at a conference last week the fabulous Stephen Bartlett from Dragon's Den and Diary of a CEO, and he has a head of experimentation in his companies, and he talks about we have to fail faster than anybody else. We have to experiment, we have to innovate, we have to give it a go. When we're the best, when we're the top, when we were the top podcast, I went into complete meltdown, because that meant we were going to rest on our laurels. We needed to keep growing. We needed to keep experimenting and failing, and experimenting and failing, and innovating and failing, which is wonderful. He creates a very safe space for people to do that. I know that's not always the case everywhere, but I have heard of a couple of large corporates who now have failure walls, which I think is a brilliant concept. So people actually put their failure up on the wall and what they learned from that failure, because failure is feedback. It depends on how you look at it. So if you're a finance leader, do you create that safe space for people to have a go and mess up, because they will get so much more confidence and courage from doing that, courage to give it another go, because they've learned something that didn't work, which means they can try something else now. I know one company I went to work in, failure was definitely not an option, and things were so hidden and so secretive, and trying to create a culture where people could give things a go and mess up. It's like, so if you mess up, what's the worst that could happen? If that was an acceptable level, then you could absolutely go for it. So I think courage comes in all sorts of different ways, and it will be, what is courageous to one person is easy for somebody else. So it's just recognizing that in team members, I think, as well. It might take a great deal of courage for someone to speak to somebody else. Don't underestimate that. And for others, they'll love speaking to everyone, but they'll really struggle with automation or something because they're more people orientated, or I don't know. But it is just recognizing that in team members, that what takes one a lot of courage, maybe not so much for the other. It's different for everybody.
So we've already covered two of the TCs, but when you look back on the Finance Business Partner Bootcamp, was there anything that surprised you that came out that you weren't expecting, or a little nugget of gold that you thought, wow, I've learned something today?
Oh, wow. What a good question. I think for me, it's always the massive inspiration I get from everybody. It makes me want to step up all the time when I hear what the speakers are doing and what they achieve. And then I hear, I see the delegates getting stuck in and, taking their courage to give things a go and ask good questions, and hearing some of their stories as well. It's so inspiring. I just love hearing from other people and what they're doing. It comes back to making me want to step up, to raise my game, to raise my standards. I need to do more. I need to be better. So I love that feeling that I get from something like the bootcamp. It's just fantastic. In terms of surprises, was there anything that surprised me? I think I just loved the whole day. I love the variety of the whole day, doing something from month-end automation with Power Query to, the creative slides that it took Keely courage to do, to Cecile's amazing story at Vital Energy, to talking about imposter syndrome. And it was just, listening about business acumen from Mohammed. Just the whole variety of the day was so amazing. And I loved hearing the recruitment perspective. I think that was a different perspective on saying similar things and similar themes. But when you hear it from somebody else, I think that can really help. We had quite a lot of that in the feedback, that, so a finance business partner isn't just technical skills. It's the soft skills are so important, and we need to really work on the soft skills. So I can say that, but they might not listen to me, but they might listen to a recruiter who deals with this day in and day out with his clients, saying, the technical skills are a given. Now we need this, and we need evidence. And in fact, he gave a brilliant acronym something I'm always saying to people is you need evidence. You know, when you go into a promotion or a new job role interview, people will always say, I've got great communication skills. We all say that, don't we? But does that mean you're good at gossiping, or does that mean you're good at imparting knowledge of financial information? Who knows? So he gave an acronym, CC, SISI, which was saved, increased, solved, and improved, I think it was. And it's giving evidence. You've saved X amount, or you've solved such and such an issue, or you've increased something by revenue, hopefully, or profit, or improved something by blah, blah, blah. So actually giving people a means of saying, yeah, I can evidence that I have done this in the workplace. And how important that is to let people know that you can really help serve that organization in this new role or in this new promotion. So yeah, it was fantastic to hear that as well. The whole variety of the day was just amazing, and hearing from so many different people, really amazing.
And who was your most inspirational individual? Which was the one that really wowed you? I'm going to put you on the spot here, Andi.
Isn't that like choosing your favorite child?
Probably.
Oh, do you know what? This is it's probably a bit of a cop-out that I'm going to say everyone inspired me for very different reasons. It might be because they're so skilled in what they do. I would say how much I loved Keely's approach. You know, there were lots of stories, journeys, skill sets, contents, but the different way, the different approach, and having that courage to give it a go. I think everyone was saying, can we have a masterclass with Keely on how to do these slides? So yeah, that was particularly energizing, as that was in the afternoon as well, when everyone was probably starting to have a bit of a, you know, food coma slump.
Yeah, that's 2:00 in the afternoon. It was a good antidote for that. Oh, well, thank you so much, Andi, for coming on and sharing your, you know, well, it sounds like an absolute fabulous event. And as I said, I caught some of it, but I didn't catch everything. So I'm going to have to grab Keely and ask her to show us this presentation, because that sounds amazing. But I want to say thank you so much, and you know, for joining me on the podcast today, for sharing, as usual, your knowledge around finance business partnering. It's such an exciting area of finance, and I'm hoping our podcast listeners have got a bit of inspiration to get curious and to have that courage to explore options and explore, you know, what the world of finance has to offer people these days. So thank you so much for joining me, Andi. It's great to have you back on the show.
Thank you so much, Hannah, and thank you so much. I've really enjoyed sharing the experiences, and I hope that's helped your listeners today as well. Thank you.